study group. So the major amendment which came in GST law was from the perspective of e-commerce operators, and we would be discussing each and every implication of that notification, circular issued thereafter, and any amendments which are necessary to be noted by professionals which are relevant for our e-commerce industry. To discuss this, we have our esteemed panelists, Mr. Puspendra Dixit ji, Head PVR Tax, Anupam Sharma ji, Director Finance, and Shashank Agarwal ji, Vineet Singhal ji, Jatan Jain ji, Sanjay Jain ji, Saurabh Aggarwal ji, and Deepali Aggarwal ji. So, without taking any further time, I would like to now introduce our NIRC ex-NIRC Chairman Shashank Agarwal ji. So Shashank Agarwal sir is ex-NIRC Chairman, and I would like him to speak few words, and thereafter we are going to proceed further on our proceedings.
Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you, Shivashish Karnani ji, advocate come chartered accountant. And I can feel the difference in Shivashish ji because I really studied the GST together with Shivashish ji. And after becoming a lawyer, his voice is actually increasing day by day. He is putting his points more confidently before the court and before the any jurisdiction authorities. I can say that. I can feel that actually. Welcome all of you, and welcome all the participants on this platform. We as the Association of Professionals and Entrepreneurs, we are actually continuously thriving upon how any person can glorify his business. What is the expectations of the business person from the government, and what is the government expectations also? Because like it is the ideal duty of every person to at least match these two requirements. So as a NGO, as a chartered accountant, this is utmost responsibility of us. On the other side, if I can say that we have to highlight the problems also which are facing by the professionals, which are facing by the companies, because right now I'm closely working with some startups, and every day they get some idea from their existing idea, and on that thing you are actually not able to identify how the GST will play a role in their total game plan. And at that time, it always hit. Like I, Shivashish and Vineet was discussing about the PVR also and Oyo also. Like because these two dignitaries on the dice are coming today. So I always feel when I talk about some business, I always feel like Oyo. Oyo is like every person has an assumption that he is just giving you the apartment on the rent. But on the other side, I always feel if I'm talking about the Oyo is also supplying food maybe. They are directly or indirectly, but they are supplying food. Like it is my assumptions. I'm just creating the assumptions. I thought another thing, maybe they are also planning some travel planning or tour planning for their customers. Like if any customer come to their Oyo room, so they are maybe giving the itinerary for the complete day travel things. Oyo can do so many things, and they are trying to do some things. Like it is just my assumption. So what are the challenges for them? On the other side, PVR is not just selling the tickets of the movie theater. They are selling the foods. They are giving you the car, chauffeur-driven car, so that you can come to the PVR cinemas. They can also do so many wonders, and they are actually doing it. Some person is getting the luxurious sitting with the complete food inside. So what and how many kind of supplies are there? One of the business idea I really took inspired from the UK. There is a one startup called Via Gogo. Me and my counterpart is discussing about that. So they are selling the second-hand tickets. Like Saurabh and me were planning to visit a PVR theater for watching some movie, and on the last point, I am not able to go to the PVR. So can I sell those tickets to anyone? What are the legal things on that? Like once you stuck with the legal thing, you are not able to do the business ideas. So all these kind of business ideas are also coming in my mind. But on the other side, the GST implication and on the sales of contract and sales of goods act, everything also hit me hard on those things. So I think the panel is here, and definitely I would be very eager to hear from Puspendra ji and Anupam ji about the insights of how and what are the challenges they faced about the GST, and what the new, like today's session is all about e-commerce. So how the e-commerce, the new notifications has impacted them, and what how the business is transforming because of that, and what are the challenges that we can took and write it today and take it to the government for any kind of like resolution or some kind of solution. At least we should do some kind of representations day by day. I'll just give you a small note that one of the representation we are also making out to the Startup India. Earlier, I was thinking that we are not gonna discuss right now, but we are going to the Startup India for a very small representation. It is totally based upon the 0% tax exemption to the new startups. Actually, like it is not happening in this way, the way it is portrayed in the public. So that is also we are writing, and Shivashish ji will definitely wet it down, and we will definitely channelize it down. So continuously we are focusing upon the more businesses. That is utmost agenda right now. So thank you again. Thank you so much for joining today in the cold winter of Delhi. I welcome you all, and please, Shivashish ji. Thank you.
Thank you, Shashank sir. That was really nice briefing, putting some macro level perspective from e-commerce industry perspective. And thereafter, now I move towards Anupam Sharma ji. So just before I invite him to put his thoughts, I'm going to share with you all his brief profile. So Anupam Sharma ji is a chartered accountant. He was earlier associated with as an audit associate with R.N. Marwa, and thereafter he moved to Ernst & Young. After working there, he was working with the Vita Sana Foods and holding a senior position there. And thereafter, he moved to Oyo. And currently, he is so earlier he was regional head Goa. Thereafter, he became regional finance head North, and now he's the director finance at Oyo. So we welcome you, sir, Anupam Sharma ji. And I hereby invite him to share his macro level perspective from e-commerce industry, and thereafter obviously GST related provisions are going to be discussed by Vineet ji.
Thank you, Mr. Karnani. Thank you, Shivashish. I mean, thank you for the warm welcome, and thanks for inviting me on this as a panelist on this session. It actually gives me an opportunity to talk about the entire industry, and one of the reason I got into this industry is actually 3 years back I thought over it where to go, right? Which industry to opt on and which industry to contribute significantly. Somewhere I picked up e-commerce because I've seen how the e-commerce was growing during that era as well. So coming from a consulting background, took a decision one fine day to get into an industry. Thought let's go into FMCG. So I picked up FMCG, working over there as a financial controller. So this organization was a sister concern for Patanjali. So got a good exposure, got a good learning to work along with Swamiji and Acharya ji. So then over the period of time, I had a thought where to go exactly to contribute significantly, right? And why e-commerce came into picture, let me put a thought around it. So I still remember in 2018 or 2017, the kind of projection which I've seen for e-commerce was significantly higher than any other industry. And another thing, the kind of ease which we all are looking forward, be it any profession, be it our profession, which is chartered accountancy, be it any other profession probably, and any other services as well, which will look forward in our household or day-to-day life. And every single thing is moving towards a transition into an e-commerce platform, because electronic media has been so much attached in our life, right? We don't even probably look forward for any offline sort of purchase in terms of goods and services. And this is one thing which triggered in my mind and got into an industry, into e-commerce, got a good opportunity. So I picked up, though this industry is a part of e-commerce aggregator, right? I'll probably talk a little bit about Oyo as a whole, then I'll move into e-commerce, right? So Shashank ji, you were apt on the business model of Oyo. So this is what exactly the Oyo is doing. So Oyo is into a category wherein they can offer budgeted hotel to the customers, to the guests across the globe now. So we started almost in 2013 from India. Now the Oyo has created a presence across the globe and significantly contributing and giving us services to each and every guest. So not only giving us services as a room services, but they also got into supply of meal services, right? Then again they got into banquet services, travel agency services. We give offline sales also. So a lot of multiple aspects comes into picture, right? So this is a kind of Oyo's business model. We work mainly on franchise model, wherein we give revenue to the hotel partners and charge commission in lieu of that. So that's basically a simple model of Oyo. But apart from this, one thing which always moves in our head is the taxation problem. And it's not a problem, actually, it's an opportunity area for chartered accountants, because this fraternity has contributed significantly in order to probably analyzing each and every provisions and each and every rules, and go back and tell all these founders to understand what exactly is coming next or what exactly is existing. And honestly, in the last 3 years, the kind of battle which I have had with the GST department is immense and significantly worse. I've spent my nights with them in order to probably explain the cases. Thanks to the degree which I have, at least a little understanding which I have got from this fraternity, and try to have a decent conversation with them. And thanks to all the lawyers as well, especially Mr. Karnani, you're coming from this fraternity as well. Thanks for the help so far. But one point which I'm definitely going to put in front of all the panelists and the guests as well, GST is actually becoming day by day more complex in terms of the e-commerce. But having said that, the contribution from our fraternity is making it much easier. So one thing which is definitely we all are looking forward is to ease down the complexities in terms of e-commerce aggregator from the taxation point of view, right? And honestly, passing on the burden from each and every place to the e-commerce operator is making it more complex from our end as well. Point number second is, I guess the provisions should be analyzed in such a manner so that there is no dispute in the future. Though we go for a lot of advanced ruling in a lot of cases, multiple cases. But having said that, I believe there's some gap in terms of the understanding by both the parties, right? By the parties which is coming from a business background, mainly are the founders of different startups, and the other party is from the taxation department itself. That gap is something which we should all discuss in this forum, how to bridge that particular gap and how to probably remove all the complexity and present all the provisions in such a manner so that we can also help all these business leaders across the market in India, right? So that the ease of services will be beneficial from both the ends. And apart from that, couple of things which is there in my mind. I mean, the kind of significant increase in the e-commerce industries is actually going high quarter on quarter. There's about 36% of growth which we have noticed in the last 2 years. Pandemic came as a disguise, but somewhere the e-commerce industry is getting the blessing out of it, right? And the projection talks about by the end of 2024, we should be touching about $111 billion as an e-commerce industry, especially in India. Currently, we are sitting at a number of about $50 billion. So it's almost 2x growth in the next 4 or 5 years, right? And this is a kind of powerful industry on which today we are going to discuss about. Handing over the platform to Shivashish Karnani to talk more about it, and then followed by Mr. Puspendra Dixit. Probably your expert thought will help all of us to talk more about it. Thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Anupam sir. That was very nice, very nicely deliberated that how in our daily life e-commerce is now playing a very significant role. And for that reason, this industry is going to be increasing at a multi-fold pace. As you said that in 2024, it is going to be 2x from the current status or more than that. So let's see. And now I move towards Puspendra Dixit ji. So a brief background before we hand over proceedings to him. He is going to discuss each and every aspect relating to that notification, which has changed GST provisions and made e-commerce operators liable to pay tax. Rather than collecting tax from each and every person, we are each and every person. So we are the household users. Rather than collecting tax from us, had we were into the business space, the liability has been shifted to a single person, that is e-commerce operator. Obviously, in e-commerce operator, there are multiple players. Introduction of Puspendra Dixit ji. Puspendra ji is a qualified chartered accountant, masters in law, masters in business finance, certified international taxation professional, certification in IPR from WIPO, and a commerce graduate having 14 years of rich experience into taxation field. Puspendra ji introduction is very long. However, I am going to touch upon the anchor points of his introduction. During his 14 years of career span, he has worked with top-notch organizations like working with German tax authorities, working with Ericsson Technologies, Mentor Graphics, NIIT Technologies, Honda Motorcycles India. And during his responsibility with these organizations, he was also dealing with direct tax aspects of these organizations, US GAAP, tax audit, tax accounting matters for a US headquartered company, and all these matters he was doing. So he is a thorough professional from a tax perspective, and for that reason, he's currently the head of PVR Group. So with these thoughts, with this introduction, I hand over proceedings to Puspendra ji. Our chat box is running. Any queries can be put on the chat box, and we are going to take up each and every query, and I am going to put those queries before Puspendra ji for his thoughts and comments, so that each and every query is addressed. Over to Puspendra ji.
Thank you, Shivashish. Am I audible to all?
Yes, you are, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I thought we have, guest and, knowledgeable professionals like Shashank ji and Anupam as well. Both have set the context right, that e-commerce is a phenomena that is not going to stop, but it is going to further proliferate, and it is going to kind of be the next thing in our lives. And we are seeing like 2x growth and all those things. And it is now the cause of concern for government as well as for businesses and everyone around, because everyone is trying to explore the possible opportunities for business. Government is bothered about the tax pie, and that is where, the most talked about pillar 1, pillar 2 is being, finalized at OECD level also, that countries across the globe, they are concerned about their share of revenue, especially the developed one, where the source or the population, of users, etc. is residing. So that is a different, discussion altogether. But coming back to GST, as we initiated our discussion by saying that things are connected. So therefore, taxation is also inseparable part of any economic activity. And government is always, trying to make sure it is easy for them to, look at the bigger player or the platform owners in terms of taxation compliance. Likewise, unregistered service providers of restaurant services, which were providing services through these platforms, they were not properly reporting their revenue. Government was having a concern as to how to, tap that unchecked revenue and make sure that right taxation is being done. And probably that is the background why this amendment is section 9, subsection 5 of CGST Act has been brought about, whereby government has, made e-commerce operators responsible or accountable for charging GST on the invoice for services supplied by restaurant, but through those e-commerce operators. So without much ado, I'll just put up a platform. I will just put up my PPT, which is a 3-4 pager simple PPT, but it will help us to set the context. Shivashish, can I share the screen?
Yes, sir. It's there.
Okay. Is it visible?
Yes, sir. It's going to, yes.
Yes, sir. It is visible now. It is visible.
Perfect. Okay. So starting with the background, that GST Council in 45th GST Council meeting, which was held on September 17, 2021, they recommended to notify restaurant services under Section 9, subsection 5 of the Act, so that e-commerce operators will be required to do GST compliance in respect of restaurant services supplied by them. That was the recommendation by GST Council, and further action on that was that notification 17 by 2021, dated 18th of November, was issued, and they have explained that now restaurant services which are supplying through e-commerce operator will be chargeable to tax, and invoice etc. will be done by e-commerce operators, including the payment of taxes will also be done by the e-commerce operator. And this change has effected from 1st of January 2022. Now, up to this time, then there was also a circular which was issued, circular number 167 by 23, dated 17th of December, which was more of FAQ in nature, to clarify the various questions which e-commerce operator or the restaurant service providers would have in terms of various compliances requirements. So this circular was also issued, and I have also made a quick reference to Section 9, subsection 5, which is a section which gives power to the government to charge to make e-commerce operator accountable for any nature of service that is being included in Section 9, subsection 5, and restaurant service has been included in it. And those circulars of 167/23 and the notification 17/2021, these are the machinery provisions to bring that thing into action. So as we know that 1st of January 2022, e-commerce operators are made liable to raise invoice and also collect GST from the end patrons and pay to the government in cash. That is the requirement. Now it will increase the burden of e-commerce operator, because earlier they were just representing the restaurant service supplier. They were doing it on behalf of restaurant supplier, but now e-commerce operator will have to issue an invoice to the end customer, charging 5% GST on that without any input tax credit. So that's a new requirement. From 1st of January, all e-commerce operators like Zomato, Swiggy, or other e-commerce platforms who are supplying the restaurant services or food supply, they are required to do that. Excuse me. This requirement has made a separate record keeping in the hands of restaurant, because the restaurant supplier, he may do both type of supplies. One, supply through its own eating joint, supply through his own website or app, and supply through e-commerce operator. So he has to have a bifurcation of records. What supply is being done through e-commerce operator, what supply is being done through his own channel, and accordingly GST will be taken care of. Supplies of restaurant which are being done by own website, own app, then GST invoice, GST charging, and GST payment, everything will be done by the restaurant supplier, which was being done before this amendment also. But any and every supply which is being done through e-commerce operator by the restaurant supplier, then e-commerce operator will be responsible for raising invoice and charging GST and paying it to the government, including the compliance requirement. There is a requirement in GST law under Section 52 that e-commerce operator has to collect tax at source for each and every supply which is being done through e-commerce platform. So those changes, like this e-commerce operator which are supplying restaurant services, those services, since invoice is being done by e-commerce operator, then they are not required to charge or collect TCS on those supplies. They will be raising invoice to the end customer. They will be charging GST at 5%. They will be paying GST in cash to the government. So no requirement to collect TCS on that. However, rest other supplies will continue to have TCS application as it was before this amendment also. A restaurant output supply liability to be paid in cash, that's a new phenomena. Typically, it's a deeming fiction which has been done through section 9 subsection 5. Government made e-commerce operator eligible, liable to pay taxation, liable to report the transaction. Maybe the underneath reason could be, I was mentioning, to tap unexplored tax revenue through unregistered service providers. In the process, those restaurant services which were doing GST on composite basis, they will also get captured, and it will also lead to some increase in end price to the end customer. For example, a service provider which was doing services on composite basis, or not composite, composition basis, then he would not have charged any GST on the end supply. But since he has to do it through e-commerce operator will be charging 5% GST over and above. Likewise, e-commerce operator is required to pay GST in cash. That is also, to my mind, is a stringent, move by the government. If they have made the e-commerce operator liable to do compliances, at least they could have allowed them to use input credit also to help them, work on cash, etc. Because it will have cash flow impact with e-commerce operator also. Next point is distinction between goods and services and compliance by e-commerce operator. So there are a lot of nuances involved in identifying a particular service as a restaurant service or a supply of goods. In my set of business also, we do restaurant services and we do some other supplies also. So unless a service is categorized as a restaurant supply, and it is being supplied through e-commerce operator, there is no requirement for e-commerce operator to collect GST on that and report GST for that. They will continue to do TCS on that. But the moment we call a supply as a restaurant supply, immediately the burden of liability shifts on the e-commerce operator shoulder. They will be collecting and paying GST on that supply. So very pertinent for a restaurant supplier as well as the e-commerce operator to have understanding and categorization of the supplies as restaurant supplies or other than restaurant supplies to be on the right side of the law. So for that we have to have a lot of deliberations and regular catch up with the suppliers and the e-commerce platforms. So people who are representing these different parties, they can understand the nuances involved in that. Exceptions to GST liability on e-commerce operator in the sense that those services which are not required to qualify as restaurant services, those will be continued to be dealt by e-commerce operator in their own capacity. Change in GST return compliance, I talked about it. This is a consequential thing that since deeming fiction has been applied on e-commerce operators, they will have to also report their supplies, which is being done by restaurant supplier through them in their GSTR1, in their GSTR3B. Likewise, restaurant supplier also has to make a disclosure of services which are being done through e-commerce operator and services which are being done through its own or at its own joints. There is one exception that if restaurants are eating joints like these hotels which are having tariff declared 7,500 or more a day, they can have exemption and they can continue to do GST compliance in respect of food or restaurant supplies through e-commerce operator the way they were doing even before amendment also. So digital economy is covering almost each and every sector. There is no second thought to it. and it is only going to increase. And that's where it is more important that government should be also participating with the e-commerce representatives in terms of how tax revenue as well as the conducive business environment for growth and sustenance is also given to e-commerce operators for the growth of the nation. This deeming fiction is an attempt to curb GST evasion by primary suppliers such as restaurant on one hand and revenue leakage that we already spoke about. But change invariably requires to reset the entire ecosystem, investment in ERP to identify and bifurcate supplies and tax accordingly by the e-commerce operator on one side, as well as the restaurant supplier also. They both have to do the tax compliances as per the categorization, whether a particular service is a restaurant service, whether it is being supplied through own channel or through e-commerce operator. So all those bifurcations, they need to be imbibed into the ERP system, which is a cost, to the company. Already pandemic, marred economy, that is going to be additional cost. And I think we have been seeing these kind of changes, including, e-invoice and all those things in past also. So, but still, I think commendable job by businesses and e-commerce that they are embracing each and every change as the government expects and try to do, right compliances. But I thought maybe more consultation is required to make it more pragmatic and practical as we proceed along, because taxing a particular revenue can be only sustainable once the model and the business nuances are understood by the government, and it can only take place through the proper representation and participation, consultation. So that is it as far as the background is concerned, or relevant notification or circular is concerned, and we can talk about more on it in terms of questions or any other curiosity or things as we speak.
सर पहला क्वेश्चन तो पुष्पेंद्र जी मेरा ही रहेगा कि I always believe that I'm not objecting to create any laws, but if it hampers to make a difficult entry for the new entrants, because I believe it is not difficult for Zomato or Swiggy or for any existing already large e-commerce companies. Yes, the implementation will take 3 to 4 months. But if I compare with the new entrants, for example, if PVR is trying to go into this market, now how much difficulty would be there? If I talk about as a startup, as a new beginner, I think I can never imagine for that then, that I cannot enter into this e-commerce market, because first of all, I have to take the responsibility of 1,000 vendors, GST registration, return filing, accounting, and tax payment. So I think this is also the one of the concern. Like while drafting a law, I think this is also the another thing which we have to always look over. And any views about from your side on this?
No, absolutely. You hit the nail by saying that. That's what I was also mentioning, that industry has been, always behaving in the right outlook and supporting the initiative by the government. But, understanding the nuances of the business. For example, you rightly mentioned, we are, already having the brunt of pandemic. And people are trying to resurrect, their systems, or they are kind of mulling courage to start something new, to make India digital India and all those things. So some relaxation, some threshold, those kind of discussions should have had in order to make it more acceptable at the larger level, where on one side you are capturing the bigger, fishes, but smaller fishes should be given some, elbow space to kind of, float around. I agree with you. In terms of PVR also, we have been, very adaptive, and food supply we have been doing through various Swiggy, Zomato, and all those, you name it. And making a change at pan-India level, that was a Herculean task for us also within, 10 to 12 days time. And there are also, some clarifications which are required, because e-commerce platform is one thing which we easily, in normal nomenclature we talk about. But there are a lot of, variances involved. Swiggy, Zomato is one, which is a proper platform, which is, catering to our food delivery and all those things that everybody knows. But there are BMS, Paytm, other setups. There are, payment aggregators and all those things also. Though they may not be doing exactly the same thing, but they are a platform. We cannot be, kind of have a plain vanilla, blanket rule for all. We have to figure out the differences. We have to understand what they are doing. Would they really be doing the, restaurant supply just because they are collecting the payment on one order? If somebody is collecting payment, would it really be pari passu or comparable with, delivery of food or not? So all those clear, clarifications, all those things will come into being once participation takes place. So that is very important. In past also, I remember like cinema were exempt from e-invoicing. But it was not clarified whether only cinema line is exempt or entity which is having cinema is exempt. So cinema operator may have a cinema exhibition business, it may have a restaurant business, it may have a advertisement business, it may have some other lines of businesses also. So an entity put together or a line of business, we made representations, but that clarity is not reached in a timely manner. But then being a tax compliant organization, a listed company, nobody would want to be on the other side of the law. They would, suo moto take registration, but, all those things require a lot of, efforts, investments, and, moving around infrastructure.
Puspendra ji, from our side, like we would be very happy to take these matters in forefront, because like what I personally feel, and on the organization level as well, because I always feel there are some intricacies on which we have actually never thought upon. Like SEIS is one of the area in which the authority always put the reversal, and SEIS is a very big area in which like government is saying that you are taking the benefit of export incentive, but on the other side the authority is saying you have to reverse all your input because you have taken the SEIS. Now why it is the requirement then? So this is another kind of the thing which requires the representation. So we would be very happy like to work with you if you need any kind of support from like all the experts are here, and like Sanjay ji is a very expert in real estates. Like his exposure is always in the real estate transactions. Like he really thoroughly working in the DLF, and he had a good exposure. On the other side, Jatan ji like always dealt with, like he is a guide and mentor for all of us. So I think to make representations is first starting of the any kind of task. I think we should do on the continuous basis, and that's why we all are here. And e-commerce, I actually feel that it is a big lacunas are there, because first of all we have to understand today I am selling on Swiggy the food, but maybe on another day I am just delivering the packet from here to there like VFast. So will you consider it as a food shifting business, because you are now transferring the documents from the same guy from who's actually taking the food delivery early? So like for the business person, I'm actually always feel that how the business will grow.
No, absolutely. You rightly mentioned more participation, because government is receptive. But the thing is that unless we represent and we make it known to them, they don't understand it. So we are the one who should be taking the lead and explain it to them so that they understand the nuances, because they don't themselves understand. But bureaucrats are told to make a law to tap a leakage of revenue. They do it from that mindset. But if we explain them, boss, if we supply, let's say, for example, there is a food supply through e-commerce operator, and there is a supply of an item which is a non-food item, or or an item which does not fulfill the criteria of restaurant. Because restaurant supply means something which you can easily which is ready to have. If you visit a restaurant, you go for dal makhni or all those kind of things, which is on the platter. It's ready to have. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to cook it. Whereas some supply which requires some popping or some other stuff, right? Which is just a packet, but it requires some preparation before to have it. It cannot be put at par with the restaurant supply. Then would the requirement of e-commerce operator to levy bill on that, or liability continue to be with the supplier. So these are the nuances and nitty and gritty. Those will be explained, and then clarification will come.
Anupam ji, anything in your mind? Because I think I was feeling you want to say so many things because you faced so many things with the authorities. Would you like to add?
You are bang on with the point which you have just put in front of Puspendra ji. So I'll tell you one simple example. Not simple example. I'll take an instance. Actually, I was working with somebody on his startup, and why such kind of provision discourage people to probably get into this sort of business, right? So this guy was actually getting into a home services business, right? Wherein some ancillary services which he'll provide to the customers, right? And the supplier here, wherein he will work as an e-commerce operator, and he will be dealing with some laborers who will never bother about their GST deposit. Point number one. Point number two, they will never agree to dilute the margin what they are making on each and every services. So as an e-commerce operator, on one services, I'm making about 20% if the next person is GST registered, right? Because any which way I can raise a GST invoice and he will be paying the GST, etc., will happen. Wherein if the next guy who's a labor, who's a unregistered guy, right? E-commerce operator will have to pay the GST to the department, and it will chunk away about 18% of the margin from my eventual margin, right? And this is one of the provision which is discouraging me to get into another startup, right? Into e-commerce platform. And I'm telling you, one way government is talking about 75 new unicorns by the 75th Independence Day. But such kind of provision, whenever comes into picture in our legislation, discourage the new guy who is coming into the startup world, right? And into this e-commerce platform. So I guess the representation definitely should happen. I mean, and apart from that, I guess this fraternity and the will probably contribute to the government in order to think more about increasing our economy from the GDP point of view. Because if this industry really requires to grow with a significant pace, then such kind of provision we'll definitely gonna look at, right? To make our country 100% compliant. But having said that, appropriate relaxation to the business guys in order to operate in the market. So this is what I wanted to share here with everyone.
So we have 3-4 queries with us for Puspendra ji and other panelist expert views on that. So first query is that once it is said that it is deemed that the e-commerce operator is making taxable supply, it is deemed as per section 9(5) that e-commerce operator is making taxable supply, whether that particular transaction on which e-commerce is already, let us say Swiggy, Zomato, is made liable to pay tax, whether it can be considered to be taxable supply of the actual restaurant who was actually providing that restaurant services. Let me take an illustration. So I am, let us say, restaurant XYZ. I have restaurant services turnover of, let us say, 1.5 CR. I have other turnover of, let us say, 1 CR. In aggregate, my turnover is 2.5 CR. That makes me liable to file my annual return. However, whether now after this provision has come up, seeing for the next financial year, and my turnover remains same, for restaurant services on which e-commerce operator has paid the tax, it is 1.5 CR, and other turnover is 1 CR. Now, for the purpose of GST, my aggregate turnover is going to be 1 CR, that is my other turnover other than restaurant services turnover, or my turnover is going still to be 2.5 CR. My turnover still is going to be 2.5 CR, including the restaurant services on which e-commerce operator has already paid the taxes, and as per section 9(5) it is deemed to be turnover of that e-commerce operator, or my turnover is now going to be considered to be 1 CR. So that is one of the query I would like Puspendra ji to address, and thereafter other panelists can add to this query.
Thank you. I think it's a very good and pertinent question, but answer lies in the question itself. The person who is supplying, it is just a deeming fiction in taxation. That liability to raise invoice and pay tax has been cast on an e-commerce operator to make sure that supplies are properly reported. Nonetheless, nobody can deny the genesis of the transaction, that it is being supplied by a restaurant and it is being supplied to end customer. So turnover wise, that will continue to be the part of turnover of restaurant, which is supplying, not the e-commerce operator. That is also clarified in the circular 167/23, 2021. That is also clarified in form of question and answer.
Other panelists view, Saurabh sir, Jatan sir, Sanjay ji.
Completely agree on this with Puspendra ji. It will continue to be a part of the aggregate turnover, and all the compliances will remain as it is, as it was earlier for the restaurant guy.
Yeah.
Jatan sir, if you like to add anything on this, Sanjay ji. So even though you may be having a view that it is going to be continuous, I mean, in any case, it is going to be forming part of that restaurant turnover. In my understanding, it is not going to be. So I have my own set of thoughts. I say this because of the fact, once you have said e-commerce operator is sitting in the place of restaurant, he is deemed to be supplier. And once he is deemed to be supplier, it shall be considered as if he is making the taxable supply, and accordingly, in his turnover, it is going to be included. And for that reason, the circular also says that it is going to be reported as a taxable turnover, column 3A1 of e-commerce operator. He is going to report this as a taxable turnover. Once this turnover is already considered to be taxable turnover of that e-commerce operator, how this can be still considered to be a turnover of that restaurant? Because a transaction inflating the a transaction making turnover of two persons. So in this particular transaction, we are saying that e-commerce operator is also having that turnover and that restaurant is also having that turnover. Two persons having turnover of a same transaction. So a transaction can be a turnover of one person. However, to my understanding, legal understanding, this cannot be turnover of two persons. So from that perspective, I differ on fact. Obviously, that circular says so, but let's see how the things get cleared in near future. Yes, Puspendra sir, you were adding something.
Just to add on what you mentioned, I think Shashank ji rightly mentioned at the inception, the additional hat of advocate that you are wearing, you always have, an additional, outlook, which is good. But nobody can deny that transaction which is, generating, or the revenue is being generated by the service provider, and the consumption is happening by the end consumer. E-commerce platform, which is just a facilitator in between. There is a law, deeming fiction in law, that has been carved out. But I think for your clarity, they have also clarified in this circular 167. I think another pertinent question one can ask, why there is a requirement to pay cash of GST by the e-commerce operator. That is a pertinent question. If at all you have asked them to pay, why can't they use their input credit, right? But I think I answered the question. It is clarified in the circular 167/23 in the form of question and answer.
But sir, then, so let us say, I understand that this point is mentioned in the circular because of the fact in restaurant services, it says that 5% tax is applicable without availability of ITC. To that extent, I agree. However, let's go beyond that and understand that during the particular month for undertaking my restaurant services, I haven't taken any ITC. However, I have brought forward ITC from my transitional credit. I have transitional credit. So now in that case, whether I can utilize that transitional credit to pay my tax liability arising on restaurant services, whether that is anyway prohibited by notification. However, circular says that it has to be paid in cash, deeming a situation that any person is going to be is not going to have any other ITC other than the goods and services which are required to be procured for restaurant services. But I am saying I have my transitional credit. Where is the notification disallowing me to use that credit for payment of taxes? Let's take another example. I may be having ITC, some ITC relating to other business. And since under GST, we have common electronic credit ledger. Now, whether can't I use the ITC which is pertaining to other business, but forming part of the common pool of electronic credit ledger, because my GST registration is common. Whether I can't use that ITC to that extent, I wish to take your thoughts on this, whether transitional credit ITC or other business ITC, which is also forming part of electronic credit ledger, why can't I utilize that ITC for the payment of taxes of restaurant services?
So when you say you are referring e-commerce operator.
Yes, e-commerce operator, or let us say so from for the present query perspective, it is e-commerce operator. He is having brought forward transitional credit.
So no, absolutely, I agree with you. My view is also the same, except reverse charge mechanism, where there is a specific mention in the law that cash tax has to be paid in cash for RCM. But other than RCM, even if it is a deeming fiction, and if you made e-commerce operator liable to tax, collect tax, pay tax, and also report tax, then there should not be any reason why they cannot use the free credit available in the electronic cash ledger. And that's where my question was, that it will also help them to monitor their what we call working capital requirements, etc. But it has been clarified through notification, but I don't think it has a force of law. Maybe they believe that dal makhani payment is done before getting the delivery, and it is as good as cash. So what is there? Cash bhi aayega, tax bhi aa jayega.
I think Shivashish ji, these provisions has been created with the urgency of revenue leakage, and they definitely know that this will in near future, with your blessings, with advocates' blessing, these provisions will definitely wipe out. But I believe this is the urgency of some kind of revenue leakage only. They are not able to find another solution except that at least we should fix something today, and we will break it in near future and create some kind of new law.
We have one query. Thanks for your thoughts, Shashank sir. We have one query from Tapas Rupelia sir. He is also one of the GST expert, and his query, I am in touch with him in few of GST groups. So his query is: will one become e-commerce operator if he trades in products and hosts them on his website and raises invoice in one's own name? So will one become e-commerce operator if he trades in products and hosts them on his own website and raises invoice in one's own name? So this is query which he has put, but I'm not able to understand what. To my understanding, he's going to become e-commerce operator, but in any case, he's the person who is paying the tax. And as such, 3 persons are not involved in this transaction. To my understanding, there isn't any concern. I think Puspendra ji can address.
Shivashish, I think इस पे नहीं होता e-commerce operator, because ये अपनी वेबसाइट पे डिफरेंट प्रोडक्ट्स को लिस्ट कर रहे हैं और पेमेंट भी कलेक्ट खुद ही कर रहे हैं और परचेज भी ये प्रोडक्ट्स का खुद कर रहे हैं, तो
खुद ही कर रहे हैं, तो as such doesn't make any difference.
हाँ, ये जैसे वेबसाइट हो.
Also gave an example also that in my set of business, I have my web app, I have my online supply portal also, and I also do supply through Swiggy, Zomato, and all other platforms. As long as I do it through my own app or my own channel, I will continue to be responsible for it, and the e-commerce operator will not be come into picture, right?
Yes, correct. So another query which has come up is earlier that notification, one of the notifications, so we had section 24 which specifically said that if any person is supplying goods or services through e-commerce operator, he is liable to pay tax as per section 20. He is liable to take registration and pay tax as per section 24. Thereafter, government issued notification that threshold limit is going to be applicable in that case also, even when you are supplying goods through e-commerce operator. Now, whether that notification has become redundant as far as restaurant services are concerned, because the liability is already shifted to e-commerce operators, whether that notification is still relevant or this notification is not relevant now, even if a restaurant is having turnover of less than 20 lakhs, even in that case, e-commerce operator is paying tax on that transaction. So wanted to understand from that perspective, your thoughts on that. Puspendra ji.
First of all, this question also in a way has been addressed in the circular that whether e-commerce operator has to take a separate registration just because it has been cast a responsibility to collect and pay GST. The answer is no. If it is already registered, because e-commerce operator are required to take registration, so that same registration will work for them. As far as the supplier of services or the restaurant supplier is concerned, if he is below the threshold, he is not required to take registration. Instead, government is wanting to bring those revenues which are untapped through this deeming fiction, that reporting is done. Once reporting is done through them, then there is no problem with the government. So 20 lakh limit will continue for that supplier also. If he is not breaching that limit, he is not required to take. But suo motu registration, nobody denies you.
But that means, sir, that even when a small restaurant supplier not having turnover of 20 lakhs, even in that case, in a way, government is collecting tax through e-commerce operator on that particular transaction.
यही मैंने पहले बोला कि it is having a downside of it. For example, e-commerce operator, unregistered supplier who is not having a turnover threshold, who's not meeting a turnover threshold, ideally his supply should have been without GST because he is below the threshold. Or any other supplier who has taken a composition, who is doing supply under composition scheme, for say, he is not charging tax GST on its output supply or on its invoice to the end consumer, but a percentage of its turnover to the government. In that case also, now in the revised deeming fiction, e-commerce operator is under an obligation to charge 5% over and above. So that 5% is going to be the cost to the dal khane wala jo bhi khayega. Yes.
Okay, noted, sir.
So maybe intention was not that, but that will be the additional cost. I'm not talking about the increase in prices, etc. Even if everything remains the same, there will be additional 5% burden, which otherwise would not have been there.
Noted, sir. So there is one query which is not specifically related to e-commerce industry. We are going to discuss that query. Is litigation the only way for payments made to vendors not appearing in GSTR 2A?
Litigation is the last way. First way is to agree in the agreement. Once you are getting signed up, agree in the agreement about the GST payment. If the amount of GST component is reflected in your 2A or 2B, then only you release the payment. Unless you take the credit of GST input, how will you be making payment to it? Because you anyway will have to, so litigation is the last thing.
But then what happens to previous transactions? Obviously, your advice is received now by us, and they are going to amend those agreements going further. See, but what happens to previous transactions which are not reflecting into it?
All responsible, business persons, they are tax compliant. Maybe they are, getting ready to the new setup or compliance and all, because GST has, been rolling around. It's been 4 years. So people are getting around the corner with the law and all things, but a genuine business person would always want to be compliant. Those cases where they are not able to reflect it, maybe because of the time lapse, because there are a lot of, ifs and buts between what was reported or what should have been reported. Maybe by the time they realize time was up, they wish to do that, they can't do for past transactions. For that, I think it's a business discussion that needs to take place, because it is not possible to revise or reflect it. But going forward, definitely make sure that you timely report it, because now GST law has also been amended in the sense that if you don't file your 1 or 3B for a month or two, then automatic suspension and all those provisions have come into being. So I think it's on top of priority for any businessman that, short while back, Anupam was also mentioning the same thing. Everyone wants to be compliant with the law, but they want to have it, convenient.
There is another query which has come up. TR Goyalji has asked whether small cloud kitchen owners doing business through ECO only required for GST registration, whether small cloud kitchen owners doing business through e-commerce operator only still required for GST registration? So what I am able to understand is there is a small cloud kitchen and his only services are supplying restaurant services through e-commerce operator. In that case also, that kitchen, small cloud kitchen, which don't has any other taxable supplies or any other supplies, still required to hold that GST registration?
करना पड़ेगा. Like if you take any RCM supply, if you are required to do GST compliance in respect of reverse charge mechanism, even if you do not have a threshold, limit, still you take registration. If you have been responsible, if you have been made responsible to raise invoice, without registration, you can't do that. And there is no exemption of any threshold as far as ECO is concerned in 9.5.
But then, sir, let's take another example that even if, let's say I'm not receiving any services which are liable to pay to be paid tax under RCM, even in that case also, and my threshold is also less than 20 lakhs.
In that case, ECO case, yes, you'll have to take registration.
Okay.
Sad, but yes.
Okay.
Generally, I think reverse charge mechanism has been introduced in such a way that, like for the advocates also, advocates doesn't have to take the registration, and on their behalf, we usually pay the tax and utilize the input. So that's why, like, because advocate doesn't want to come into the GST ambit, but in that way, like it never increase the turnover for any advocate, and all the turnovers, whatever done, we usually do in our GST registration. I think this provisions also come up in that similar manner, that even the restaurant owner is taking the registration or not, they are collecting the taxes and paying the taxes and also doing all the compliance on behalf of the restaurant owners. So is it also creating any impact on the, because these are two aspects. One is the tax liability is zero on the restaurant owner now on the cloud kitchen, because all the taxes has to be paid by the e-commerce operator. If there is no tax burden on the e-commerce operator, then why there is a registration requirement is also there? Like, I think to mitigate this effect, for the tax compensation also, I think registration is not required as such. What is your views as advocate, Mr. Shivashish?
I think it is a litigious issue, and yes, registration should not be required, but yes, it is also better to hold the registration.
For reverse charge purposes, we have a special notification, but this is a special case. This is not a reverse charge.
This is a special case.
Correct. For reverse charge, we have a notification that registration is not required. Correct. On the same line, we should have it for the e-commerce operators, the persons who are supplying to e-commerce operators.
With this, I think queries are over now, and I refer now to Jatan sir or Sanjay sir for their thoughts, if any, on this subject.
Definitely would love to hear them.
Yes. We actually never didn't heard Sanjay ji or Jatan ji today.
Or Deepali ji, if Deepali ji is here.
Yes. Sanjay ji, please, over to you. Unmute yourself and please share something.
Sanjay sir, you can speak slightly low. That is not an issue because you were ill earlier.
So far as the new provisions are concerned in the e-commerce industry relating to restaurant services, I trust there is some kind of confusion they have created in terms of the services provided by the restaurant service provider to the e-commerce, how the things going in the books of accounts so far as the reporting is concerned. Now the one single turnover is reflecting in the two books of accounts. Number one in the restaurant services, and number two in the books of e-commerce operator as a GST taxable turnover. How the things will evolve over the next period of time, it is interesting to see when the restaurant service provider is getting notice from the department, and at the same time the e-commerce operator is getting notice from the income tax department, because there would be mismatch. Reportable income in the income tax department as well in the GST taxable, and the same case lies in the restaurant service provider. This would be a very interesting scenario I could perceive. This is my thought on the new provisions. And over to Shivashish ji.
I guess
Very,
one point.
really nice thought. This is really a practical aspect which Sanjay sir has touched upon. Many professionals, including advocates, received notices to explain the variance between the turnover income which is reported in income tax return and non-reflection of any turnover in service tax return. So notices have come up earlier also. Very nice practical issue which is raised by Sanjay sir here. Because of this reconciliation and because of non-reconciliation which is done by departmental personnel.
I would like to raise one more very important aspect besides the ITC accumulation at the end of the e-commerce operator. There is huge ITC accumulation at the end of the players who are supplying through e-commerce operators with no provisions of refund. If I am supplying, I'm not talking about the food industry because even earlier they were not entitled to ITC. Suppose if I am a trader selling fabric through an e-commerce operator, my output liability is just 5%. But the e-commerce operator charges me huge commission on which 18% taxes are being paid by me. So I am ending up in accumulation of ITC with no refund provisions. So that ITC is a very major challenge for all the players who are supplying to e-commerce operators. Even
Correct.
that needs to be addressed by the, by the industry to the Ministry of Finance.
Textile sector, government
Yes.
proposed to increase the rate from 5% to 12%. It was supposed to be increased from effective 1st January. It was a good news for businesses, but a sad news for consumers because the rate was getting increased. However, if the consumers think broadly, in any case, they were at a position of loss earlier also because of the fact that credit was getting accumulated. And in a way, it was getting embedded in the cost, and thereafter they were paying that cost. So in any case, however, prima facie to customers, it looks like they are paying excess GST because rate is getting increased. And to bring those, to address those sentiments in the election, to address the elections which are coming, it was decided to defer this provision and refer to GST committee to decide on rate rationalizations.
But the Saurabh ji, what shared na is actually facing by so many e-commerce business persons. And Saurabh, actually this is happening, and everybody is asking for the planning how we can get this GST refund, and this is actually happening.
Correct.
Please.
ITC accumulation is a huge working capital blockage.
Exactly.
In fact, a trader is not earning that much. Jitna wo working capital block.
To the extent he blocks his credit in the working capital. Correct, sir.
No,
Correct.
but Shivashish, what stops government to make the what we call this stuck up credit as refundable? Yeah, they don't need to increase GST rate 12%. Then only it comes in normal machinery provision. No, they can allow if there is a different in tax rate. There are 3 possibilities why refund can be generated, and
Correct.
one of those is that different rate of input and output. What stops them to do that when they carve out a fiction, when they carve out everything? So,
but sir, that provision, I totally agree with you, but that provision says the refund is restricted to the inputs, ITC on inputs. On input services, as Saurabh sir said,
what stops them?
I have one
Yes,
thought.
yes.
I have one thought. Basically, department or government is not willing to give the cash refund to the. That is the whole idea. That's why they are coming with the new ideas. Otherwise, they have no problem at all.
See, if we were to look back, Rule 36(4) was what? Why they were mandating you have to pay itna cash. These all are devices to make sure every month and they have a desired, target fulfilled.
Correct.
That is the whole intention.
Correct. I think Jatan sir and Deepali ji, if they are available, they can share their thoughts, any final thoughts. And thereafter, for vote of thanks, I would like Vineet Singhal ji our manager, chief manager managing this entire webinar to share his thoughts and share his concluding remarks.
Shivashish ji, I have one or two small questions from Anupam ji and Puspendra ji. Can I have that now?
Yes,
Vineet
yes,
ji-
sir.
Vineet
And
ji-
thereafter you can give
Yeah.
vote of thanks.
विनीत जी, मैं पहले विनीत जी के बारे में कुछ जरूर बोलना चाहूंगा. हम सब जो डिस्कशंस करते हैं ऑन द प्रोफेशनल साइड है. नाउ आई रिक्वेस्ट एवरीवन टू हियर फ्रॉम द बिजनेस साइड एज वेल. जैसे पुष्पेंद्र सर ने बोला कि वो बिजनेस पर्सन का इनपुट नहीं आया तो हमें पेमेंट रोकनी चाहिए. तो यही आइडिया मैंने कल विनीत जी को दिया था. अब हम विनीत जी के मुंह से सुनेंगे इसके ऊपर क्या क्या दिक्कतें आती हैं छोटे बिजनेसमैन के लिए, कि भाई क्या चैलेंजेस है.
एक SME पेमेंट नहीं रोक सकता because he don't have the choice to lock the vendor कि मेरे को इस वेंडर से लेना है और इस वेंडर से नहीं लेना. He have that a necessity to lock that vendor in terms of rates, in terms of availability, in terms of credit period and all. So हम लोग वेंडर का पेमेंट as a SME नहीं रोक सकते. तो वो तो ऑप्शन नहीं होता. हमारे साथ ऑप्शन वही होता है कि टैक्स पे कर दो, ठीक है, अगले महीने दोबारा क्रेडिट ले लेंगे, रिफंड ले लेंगे. So that is my take on this block credits and all. But now as a businessman also and an entrepreneur, I would like to take this opportunity where Anupam ji and Puspendra ji are here and they are managing these big firms and all. And they both are into an industry which are badly hit by this COVID pandemic for last 2.5 years. I would like to understand if they have any role in operations and all, how they have transformed their business and make it still profitable or still going on. What are the changes that they have made in this pandemic period so that their business is already running, the brand is running? Because there are many SMEs that are now shut down. There are many travel agencies, many small hotels that are shut down. There are many small, as in we have connections with some small movie halls and all. So they are also shut down. But how PVR and how Oyo are managing their things, and what are their advices to SMEs and other small people who are in these industries? So any thoughts on that are welcome.
Yeah, Vineet, first on the SME part, which you said that SMEs has to deposit the GST to the department and then they'll wait as and when the GST will reflect the credit. The same problem is happening with us also, considering we are a bigger organization, right? Because today, if any customer escalations happens on social media, right, it gives me a much higher cost than withholding their GST with us, right? And this is exactly one of the biggest problems which I am facing in my everyday life. We as a practice withheld the GST of the other party, but having said that, one customer escalation goes on a social media, we have to take a back foot, right? So this is a common problem for across all the industry, across all the businesses, right? So there is no difference in between a SME or a bigger business, right? That is just to answer of one of your thought. And we definitely need to represent to the government and find out some sort of a solution around it, because there's only one option which is left, is like going into a litigation, which nobody wants, right? It's only the unfortunately lawyers make the money, nobody else.
So Anupam, we welcome you to come with us, coordinate with us, and we mutually can make a representation to the government.
Absolutely, we should do that.
A number of professionals backing that representation. So we would be very happy to work with you and Puspendra ji to prepare a representation and at least try to meet people or bureaucrats in the ministry.
I'll be glad to be the part of that committee. On second part, which you have asked, see, pandemic gave us a back foot in terms of our business, in terms of our thoughts also about the business, right? I still remember pre-COVID level, we were about, let's take an example, we were about 500 odd crores of monthly revenue. Post-COVID, the scenario dropped down by 5x. So this is the kind of situation with what we have seen in the business. But one good thing which has happened in that entire pandemic, we never lost the hope, right? I've been associated with Oyo pre-COVID, post-COVID as well. So you would have seen whenever any sort of big wave comes in the sea, what fishermen does, they go back and repair their nets, right? And they wait for the right time to go get into the sea and do the fishing. This is what exactly Oyo has done in the last 2.5 years. What we have done, we have analyzed each and every business units what we had. We gave our thought, we optimize our entire model. I'll give you one small example how exactly we have done. So we used to spend a lot of money on supply acquisition, right? Because we had a huge manpower sitting who used to do the supply acquisition, right? So then we actually thought of it how to optimize our entire cost. We converted our entire supply acquisition into a master franchise model, which converted from a fixed cost model to a variable cost model. If the supply acquisition will happen, then the cost will come. Otherwise, it will not come. Our cost dropped down by 30%. Right. So all these examples, right? All these repair in the business, what we have done in this pandemic, and we actually were waiting for the right time to fetch the profits out of the market. And honestly, before pandemic also, we were not EBITDA positive. In the last 5 odd months, we were consistently delivering EBITDA positive. That's a kind of, pandemic though came as a disguise. Again, I'm saying the same thing, but a lot of businesses who never lost the hope repaired their nets and now were waiting for the right time of opportunity. And this is how we have managed our business. And now it is flourishing. We are gunning towards an IPO with a EBITDA positive margin, unlike penetrating the SEBI new model of APAC, right? SPAC model, wherein any loss-making company can get into a IPO listing. So that's a kind of opportunity which we had, and we penetrated into it instead of, probably losing the hope of because of this pandemic. So that's how we have managed so far, Vineet. Just to answer your question.
That's a great thought process to repair yourself whenever you get time.
Yeah.
Puspendra ji, what's your thoughts? How PVR transformed itself to this pandemic thing?
Yeah, I mean, I represent an industry which is, faced the most of brunt in this pandemic, and you can't change that. Neither the entertainment will go away. That is the, one of the most sought after means of, entertaining us. And, going to movie along with family or friends, it's not only a watching movie, it's an experience, it's a time which we share with the family, and that continues to be there. In cinema, we have seen disruptions from day one. I think pandemic is just another, variation, obviously the deadly one, but then it was ever since VCR days, cable days, and what we call these OTT days. So we have, embraced those disruptions and always tried to come up and make sure that, movie experience remains, unbeatable. And content is the king. As we are getting good contents, people drop into cinema. And as this, I think, taking leave from Anupam, what he mentioned, we not only repaired net, we added more nets. In this ebb and flow, we kept pushing the envelope. We installed HEPA air purifier, touchless system was created where patrons don't need to do any physical touch. All touchless points were created. A lot of investment in new cinema and things, including thinking aloud in terms of food and beverage section. We started online supply of food as well, which was not the case pre-pandemic. We started some sanitization services as well, which all are creation of this testing time. So always try to be on top in terms of the luxurious and experience, because promoter believes the experience that we give into cinema, that it keeps us on top of other competitors, and continues to be the thrust. And we are hopeful that as things progress, we'll be back to pandemic level. Short precursor was there in last 2.5 months when we saw the relaxations in place and good contents came in, like Spider-Man, this 83, and another movie called I'm just missing the name. So all those movies, they are good contents and generated humongous revenue. Nonetheless, a lot could be done because we have had one close to 2 years losses where there was always a fixed cost which was generating and no top line was there. But pretty much hopeful and optimistic that cinema is going to continue. It is just that we have to find newer ways to be relevant and make sure that how we can ensure more, environment friendly and user experience. That's, we are always at aiming at.
Thank you so much, Puspendra ji and Anupam ji. These were like inspirational words for any SME. To what I understand as a crux is to not let the hopes down and being optimistic. That's what I understand from the big businesses like yours to an SME.
Yeah.
Shivashish ji, over to you.
I think if Deepali ji or Jatan ji's, both of them, if any of them are here, they can share their thoughts. Otherwise, Vineet sir, you can give vote of thanks and thereafter wind up this session.
Deepali ji and Jatan ji.
No, I think they are not. They are not here.
Okay.
So you can give your final concluding thoughts. Give a vote of thanks. I think Deepali has come up here. Hi, Deepali. Hi, Deepali. Any of your thoughts on e-commerce operator related changes from GST perspective or a macro level perspective? How you foresee this e-commerce industry, and I mean, any thoughts on that front?
Basically, I would say the basically changes has a major impact on each and every e-commerce operator, as we all know that e-commerce is a major player now. So this GST changes are going to impact at a very broad level. In fact, each and every one of us. This is for now, as of now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Deepali.
Thank you.
Over to Vineet sir to give vote of thanks to speakers and other participants, and thereafter we can wind up this session.
So at the outside, I would like to thank each and every participant here. In the beginning, when we started, we were joined by around 50 odd participants, and it is very heartening to see that almost everyone would have been joined till the last. That means that the topic is of interest, and our speaker, Mr. Puspendra Dixit ji and Anupam ji, have really presented their points very, very generously and very comprehensively. Even to an entrepreneur like me, it was easier to understand what are the provisions and what are the changes that has been came up. So I would like to thank every participant here, every speaker, and all the panelists. I would like to thank Puspendra ji and Anupam ji to take their time off from their busy schedule and come on this platform, and we would like to have them again and again on our platform whenever they get time and on the specific issues. I would like to thank Sanjay ji, Jatan ji, Saurabh Aggarwal ji, and Deepali for their continuous support to this platform. They are like backbone to all of us. They provide a kind of enthusiasm to us to organize these workshops and seminars for all the members in practice and in employment. I would especially like to thank our Indirect Taxes Committee Chairman, Mr. Advocate C.A. Shivashish Karnani. He is the one who is pushing us to hold these webinars, hold these workshops, and bringing top-notch speakers like Puspendra Dixit ji and Anupam Sharma ji on our platform. So he is the driving force behind all these webinars on GST and on indirect taxes. I would like to thank him. I would also like to express my gratitude and love for C.A. Shashank Agarwal ji. He, being an ex-chairman of NIRC and ICAI, was very busy last year. But this year we took hold of him, and we will continue to welcome him on all our platforms. He's a co-founder of Chartercross Foundation. The idea behind Chartercross Foundation began from his mind, and we all came in and created this platform. I would like to inform every participant here and all those who are will be listening to the recordings also, that Chaturma Foundation in last 1 year or so has successfully installed 3 oxygen plants all over India, which are now providing oxygen to around 70 odd patients concurrently. We are also in process to install other oxygen plants. Donations are coming in, and our in our organization we are a Section 8 NGO. And as Shashank has mentioned, we are now more interested in representing professional lacunas and all to the ministries, be it in indirect taxes or direct taxes or the MCA part. So we would like to welcome any issues that are coming to the participants or the speakers to at least inform them to us, and we will try to raise that issue to the highest authority possible. So that's all from me. Thank you, Puspendra ji. Thank you, Anupam ji. Thank you, Sanjay ji, Saurabh ji, Shashank ji, Shivashish ji, Deepali ji, Jatan ji. And I would like to especially thank Sushil Verma ji. He is an eminent GST speaker. He joined in between. He was on the panel. So he's a very senior GST speaker, and we would like to have him in another workshop. So thank you all the speakers, all the panelists, and all the participants. We will join soon again in another workshop. Thank you all.
Thank you so much,
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank
really
you,
appreciate it.
Puspendra ji. Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.